Here's a weapon I bet you haven't thought of in a while, the Viper. This is one of the early game weapons that we all get as a new player, and almost none of us ever actually try out. I'm actually interested to see in the comments below how many of you actually use this weapon when you were lower level, because I didn't really know anything about it until quite recently, actually, when I leveled it up to try it out for this video. It was one of the many high fire rate SMGs that had really decent damage that I really wanted to give a shot and see if it, did any good in the end game, and I am happy to report that it definitely did. I recorded all of this gameplay side by side with my Riptide, which I am also going to be covering in a future video, probably soon. I'll link it below when it releases, but the Riptide fell a bit short. Note, it did have blue perks, which is only on average, it seems to be slightly worse than gold. I don't have any specific numbers, but if I were to round 10 to 15, 20% maybe less overall damage, which is slightly significant, but it's more or less the amount of eating a coconut, which you see me do often in this video. So I do believe it would have performed almost as well if it was gold perks. So the Viper is actually something that impressed me quite a bit. You can see that I've got it with crit rating, crit damage, mag size, and I'll explain all of this in a second. Mag size is because it has a base 1.4 reload speed. That's crazy fast. That's perfectly fine. That's going to reload plenty quickly. And then, of course, crit damage is pretty common amongst all weapons. It just has the highest DPS. There's not really much to talk about in regards to crit builds. But what I do want to mention is the fact that this does have the option to go fire rate and damage, which I've mentioned many times in the past is statistically identical. It's fundamentally identical. It's about a 0.02% damage in overall DPS. You'll shoot more, reload more often, and you'll do less damage per bullet on average. So I prefer crit build on this simply so I can stay in the fight longer and have to reload less often and be able to be more effective in that regard. However, I always like to mention that fire rate damage is the same. So mag size, again, I don't think you want damage, because I did this with the Silent Spectre, actually. In fact, I've been meaning to update that video at some point. A lot of people have been asking me, because a lot of weapons that had no damage perk here had mag size, durability, reload, and weapon stability. That's very standard for a lot of weapons. So recently in the 12.0 update, Epic actually added a damage bonus here, which is, on the Silent Spectre, real damage output when you factor in the crits and the damage to slowed and snared and the energy, 20% damage, everything all included. It's actually about a real world difference of 15%. And that's because damage goes to the base value and everything else gets stacked on top. It really wasn't that significant to me, because what you're seeing here is a effective 15% damage bonus when the mag size is 75% bigger, which means you'll be shooting more than twice as often if you're using assault ammo recovery, or as you can see, 75% longer, compared to a 15% damage boost. I would much rather have a longer continuous fire than a slight damage buff, and that's a personal preference. So you can go damage if you want to maximize your output, but I think with the 13.5 shots per second that this thing is outputting, you're going to want as many bullets in that magazine as possible. Of course, as I mentioned, reload is completely unnecessary. With a 1.4 reload speed, you are going to be right back in the fight, no problem whatsoever. As for the element, I'll link my video in the description below on all the different elements. Up to you. It doesn't matter. Essentially, physical, you typically want to avoid if you're in Canny Valley or later on, because elemental zombies kind of laugh in the face of physical, but every other element is kind of just up to you. And then, of course, damage to slowed and snared or damage to afflicted is incredibly important for this. So what you get here is the potential to have a 45% added damage after the first bullet, and that's where I wouldn't recommend using this weapon without slowed and snared or afflicted, because if you don't have that damage to afflict or slowed and snared, you're losing out on 45% damage. You might want that headshot bonus, I guess. This thing is nowhere near accurate enough to hit enough headshots. In fact, one thing I wanted to mention was the fact that this weapon hits pretty okay. It does decent damage, it shoots very fast, decent reload, everything's going for it except for the accuracy. Its range is abysmal. In fact, I got a clip here where it just does really great damage up close, and then it's just spraying and praying at a distance, and it's really ineffective. So anybody who's trying to build this around anything that's going to require any precision, I would highly recommend against. And so damage to afflicted and slowed and snared down here is certainly what you'd want. And of course, you'd want this 5th perk to match. And that's pretty much it about the Viper. It's one of those old classic weapons that I'm sure everybody has. It's base game, so you can get this from any llama. You can research it in the collection book right now if you wanted to, and it's one of those good weapons that you might not have even known existed, and I'd recommend trying it out if you're looking for something new to play with. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Check out the Riptide video upon release in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day.